Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I am Allison Felber and I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest today, our panel. This is going to be a fantastic session, you guys. We have such a great group of MSPs and experts lined up to talk to you today about some surprising findings that we found from this emerging tool that you can add to your stack. You are joining us today for that panel. And we've got quite the party here today. We've got a lot of people on here today to share their expertise with you. I've got Malcolm McGee from CMIT San Antonio, Jesse Judkins from RQM Consulting. I've got Amit Dillon and Rob Inman, from the Firmware Guru Company, Phoenix. And then you've got myself bringing the party here. Again, my name is Allison Felber. I am the editor-in-chief at MSP Success. And as you know, MSP Success, we provide you with news, trends, business building strategies specifically for you for the MSP community. But you're on here, so you know that. You're already a part of our tribe. It's nice to see you again. And we've got such a fantastic panel lined up for you today. And I thank you for taking some time out of your busy day to come join us today, because you are going to get a lot from this. Pull out a pen and piece of paper. You're going to want to jot down some notes. Whenever I do a webinar or a panel or a session in person, I tell people take out something physical that you can take some notes on and write down some to-dos, on that piece of paper. And at the end, look over the to-dos that you have, circle just one of them and say, I'm going to do this. Because I want every single webinar session that you attend for you to leave with something actionable that you can do to either improve your business, improve yourself, improve your team, improve your stack. So make sure you're writing that down as you come up with these to-dos and choose one, at the end. So to kick us off, I want you to go ahead, throw into the chat here. I want to see kind of where everybody is located at. So throw in the chat where you're at. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. Actually, I'm right outside of Nashville, right north of it, about 10 minutes north of Nashville. My friends come out here. They say I'm in the country, but it takes me 10 minutes to get to Broadway. So I'm not in the country, but whatever. I guess that's the country for them. We've got Utah, North Carolina, Melbourne Beach, okay, Ohio, New York, Brentwood, hey, Nashville, another Nashvillian, Dallas, London, hello, Monroe, Canada, Boston. I was supposed to be there this week. I'm not. Arizona, Texas, California, Atlanta. I love it. We've got people all over the world. Alberta joining us, Rochester, hey. Okay, so glad to see you guys here. Welcome wherever you're at. And today we're going to be talking about a new technology that is going to save you hours in your text time, or it's going to erase a security gap that your clients probably have. It's going to streamline a process to increase your efficiencies. Some of the MSPs, have said that this new technology is too good to be true. I'll let you be the judge of that. We're going to talk today about how to remotely, and I want you to kind of key into that word, remotely access, configure, manage, monitor, and protect the BIOS firmware level for your clients, so that you can stop sending texts on site to fix those complicated firmware issues and start bringing the firmware to you remotely. We're going to be talking about the pros and cons of this technology and how you should and shouldn't use it. You're going to hear from our MSPs on here real stories about some issues that they're trying to solve for in their real life business, same issues that you're facing today. You're going to hear your story in their words. They're going to talk about how they've rolled out their remote firmware management and protection system. They'll share the good, the bad, and the ugly. And also some benefits that they've seen from it. So you can decide if it's something that you want to add to your stack to get the same benefits they have. They're also going to talk about some use cases, some real life issues that they've faced and that they've solved for their clients, and just really talk about the biggest benefits that they've seen. Now, big bonus for all of you who are on here. We're actually giving away some free scans for you and your clients. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Amit actually is going to later on in this webinar, but we've got some free scans for you and all of your clients. And so hang tight. We'll talk about how to get those and how you can kind of try it before you actually commit to anything. But this is about our panel today. Before I get into our panel, I'm going to answer all of the obligatory questions that I get on every single webinar. Are you recording this? Yes, we're recording it, and we'll give you a link to it as soon as it's done. You'll probably get it tomorrow once we get it uploaded into our system, but we are recording this. Also, this is a webinar, so we want to get questions from you at the end. So if you have questions throughout, throw them into that questions area. Please don't put them into the comments. It'll get lost in all the different comments that are in there. Put it into the questions area if you have a question. If we don't answer it right away, we're not ignoring you. We're just saving it until the end. So questions into the question area, comments into the comments section. Hope you all got that. And I'll say it again because I'm going to get the question. Yes, we are recording. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists. We've got a great group of MSPs and industry experts on with you today, Malcolm, Jesse, and Amit. I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Jesse. If you could kind of tell the attendees on here today who you are, your role at the company, a little bit about the company, if you guys have a specific industry or niche, and like the approximate size, whether you want to do that in endpoints, revenue, number of employees, just to give everybody a sense of your situation.
All right, thank you. My name's Jesse. I'm the IT operations specialist at RQM Consulting. We are kind of breaking out of break fix into managed services. We are what I guess you'd call a small MSP in Oklahoma, Oklahoma City. What else did you ask? We
Your
have
role at the company.
a couple hundred endpoints that are halfway managed, and we're trying to get them onto a steady package that's uniform. That's one of our main goals. But we're growing quickly. Just recently hired another tech in the past couple of months, and I guess that means we increased our whole employee base by 33% because that's just how big we are. So.
No, that's great. And your role at the company, Jesse?
IT operations specialist. I'm Rod, the boss's right-hand man.
All right. And the one who's kind of evaluating all the new technologies, right?
Yes, that's a big portion of my responsibility.
Okay, I love to hear that you guys are moving from break fix into managed services. Anybody else here on the webinar in that boat? Throw it in the chat. You know, I know a lot of people, especially, you know, at that size are kind of making that transition. Like, I want to stop doing this break fix. Like, I want that reoccurring revenue. I want to start, you know, being able to predict my revenues. So we got one there, Bill. All right, there's your fan. All
You
right,
and me
thanks,
versus the world, Bill.
Jesse. Yeah, oh, Colin too. We got, I would say, I know we've got more out there. I hear that all the time, you know, all of y'all trying to convert to MRR. So Malcolm, I'm going to bounce over to you. If you could talk a little bit about, you know, your company, again, if you've got an industry or vertical, where you're at, approximate size, go for it.
Absolutely. Malcolm McGee with CMIT Solutions in San Antonio, Texas. I have one of the franchises that CMIT has, if you aren't familiar. We are a 600K business growing towards a million. And we've been general to this point this year. We're trying to identify a target niche that we'll settle on, but we've got some construction, we've got some healthcare, we've got some quasi healthcare, we've got some security, and just looking to develop a niche within that group. So hopefully that answers any questions.
Yeah, how long you been in business, Malcolm?
I am in my 20th year, and to this point, I've managed it as a concierge IT or boutique IT, however you want to look at it, type of business. My lifestyle and the impact that I want to have is changing, so hence the move to grow more so into cloud services and cybersecurity as more of my clients and potential clients are coming to me needing better cloud solutions. And while they don't say they have a need, we recognize that they do have a need for improved cybersecurity.
Well, happy 20-year anniversary.
Thank you.
All right, last but not least, I've got to meet if you want to kind of talk about yourself and why we have you on here as our expert.
Yeah, well, hopefully we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the product that I help manage. So Amit Dillon, I'm out here in California. I'm with Phoenix Technologies. obviously hosting the webinar here today in terms of our content. Very much looking forward to talking about FirmGuard, which you'll hear us talk quite a bit about. We'll do a demo towards the end, and it does a variety of things. Both Jesse and Malcolm are very familiar with the product. They're both customers, but it does things like BIOS firmware security. You'd kind of mentioned that before, compliance, as well as technician efficiency. Really, just making your technicians more efficient. At this point, I don't know how many MSPs I've talked to, probably not as many as you, Allison, but every time I talk to somebody, they're always like, oh, I wish there were more hours in the day. How can I make my technicians or even myself more efficient? And so we'll talk about that as well, how FirmGuard can help. And, I'm the marketing guy, but Jesse and Malcolm, they'll talk to you about it in practice.
Right. I think we had someone else from California, a couple of West Coasters. So you've got your tribe here too.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, our first question, I'm going to actually ask you, since I already have you talking, let's
Sure.
just kind of start, 101 level, back to the basics, for those people who are on here who maybe, aren't familiar with it. We're talking about BIOS firmware today, the firmware.
Right.
What is BIOS firmware?
Sure. So I think the simplest way to think about it, Allison, is when you hit the on button on, pick your favorite endpoint, be it a server, the laptop you're using right now, the very first piece of software that comes up, even before the operating system, is the BIOS firmware. So a lot of people are not aware of that because, back in the old days, you would actually see a screen that came up and talked about the BIOS firmware. That doesn't really happen anymore. But the key thing is it's the very first piece of software that comes up. It actually looks at the hardware, makes sure everything is okay, and then it actually launches the operating system. So without the BIOS firmware operating properly, the OS wouldn't launch. And there's one thing that I want to mention. So the standard, the modern standard for BIOS firmware is called UEFI or UEFI. We don't need to get into what that is, but the reason I mention it is that's the modern standard, and everybody's endpoint, all the MSPs on here, your clients, should be running UEFI firmware. But you'd be surprised at the number of endpoints out there that are operating in legacy mode, meaning think of it as not up to the latest standard. And just to give you an idea, we've done a couple of these webinars before. We had the secure check audit, which you mentioned before. You can go to firmguard.com/TMT and you can look at that. I'll talk about that offer a little later. But the reason I mention that is because from the previous audits that we've done with live MSPs, we saw that nearly 9% of endpoints that we audited did not have the latest UEFI standard firmware. And so what that essentially means is those 9%, can be a significant number of endpoints. They're extremely vulnerable. They're not using the latest standard, which is much more secure. And so there are really steps that you must take as an MSP if you've got those in legacy mode. And one of the things we'll show my colleague Rob Inman on the demo a little later is right on the dashboard of FirmGuard. We'll tell you right away, hey, look, these are the endpoints that are in legacy mode, and we'll even help you, mitigate that.
Okay, perfect. All right. So as soon as you start your computer, server, whatever it is, thing that boots everything up, critical.
Gotta have it. Yep, gotta have it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want to kind of pivot to our MSPs now, Jesse and Malcolm. When it comes to, the BIOS firmware level, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've come across in terms of managing, monitoring, and protecting, that firmware level? I guess, Malcolm, we'll start with you.
Well, I've long since tried to put my tech days away, but they still creep up on me here and there. And the lack of knowledge and comfort that I had with BIOS still sticks with me. And anytime you start monkeying with the customer's machine and you mess it up and you got to go into the BIOS and try to figure out how to undo something, it's a nightmare. And so when I mentioned it to my techs, I said, hey, thinking selfishly, I'd like to have this because if I got to touch this stuff, I want to have something at the ready that I can use to do it in the most efficient way possible. What do you guys think? And they said, that will save us a ton of time. So having to stick hands on someone's computer anymore for any sort of BIOS setting, that is out the door. I can have the techs can log into it, do whatever they need to do remotely. We had a situation where a customer wanted us to secure wipe their machine, and we didn't have a tool in the stack to do so. While we could have been deploying those things, we hadn't. And this just seemed to check a lot of boxes for us in setting a good security foundation for us.
Okay, I think when you and I were talking, I think it was when all of us were kind of chatting about, just what do we want to talk about on this panel. I don't know if it was you or Jesse, but someone brought up, there's this BIOS intimidation.
Oh, definitely.
This almost like Pavlovian response to when you hear like, oh, BIOS firmware, you're like, oh, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
Yes.
And
that was
and
me.
we all
Yeah,
we all laugh and shake our heads, but I'm sure everybody on the webinar is kind of shaking their head too, like I don't want it. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to. I don't want to.
I'm going to use that term, Malcolm, bias intimidation. I liked it when you said that last. It sort of sums things up really well.
Yeah. Can you relate to that, Jesse? What are kind of what's your response to kind of the challenges to managing, monitoring, and protecting the firmware level?
Yeah, I agree with Malcolm wholeheartedly. The whole not knowing what you're going to see whenever you boot into BIOS is something that scares any tech, because if you're getting into BIOS, you're already in deep water as is. You that's your last resort. So when you're tapping whatever button on the launch sequence to get into that panel, you really don't know what you're going to see on the screen. You don't know what settings are going to be available. They may have a different name because it's a different manufacturer. And for one thing, you've already made your way out to the client's computer and you're sitting in front of it. And you may or may not have somebody looking over your shoulder, watching you
Breathing down your neck.
tap through panels, trying to find what may or may not even be there. So I definitely prefer what I've got now, which is a standardized panel with easy to read text that isn't mushed down into the wrong resolution. And it's remote for one thing. I don't have to hop in a car and go find this computer in the office. And it's something I can reliably get repetitive results out of. I can get the same thing every time. I know what I'm expecting. And I can find what I need to find without restarting the computer, and I won't need to interrupt work to just discover what's available.
Yeah. And even if, you do send a tech or yourself all the way out, to the client site in order to sit in front of their computer and access that firmware level, let's say you think you've solved the problem, you leave, you go back to the office, there's that lingering fear of like, did I leave something undone? Right? Kind of like sits on your shoulder, like haunts you in your dreams or nightmares, and you just kind of cross your fingers, hoping that you don't have to go back out there again, right? Before you had, this solution, that we're going to be talking about today. I mean, do you want to kind of talk about, some of the security risks that kind of exist at the firmware level?
Sure. Yeah, so my guess is most people on this call are not familiar with the sort of common vulnerabilities that exist for BIOS firmware. So one thing I'll mention is you can go to firmguard.com, security vulnerabilities, and we've got a thing that we'll show you the different ones, and they have names like Pixie fail, logo fail, moon bounce. I'm not sure exactly who comes up with these names, but they sound funny, but they're definitely not a laughing matter. And there's one in particular that I'll talk about, and I think this will give you a sense of why this is so important. So there's a one that Microsoft talks about quite a bit. It's called Black Lotus. It's just the name of the vulnerability. Think of it, like a virus. And what it does is, so there's this thing, and I don't want to get too technical, but there's this thing called secure boot that's in the modern UEFI standard. And essentially what that does is that guarantees that when the firmware launches the operating system, that it's going to launch an authenticated version of Windows, for example. so that you don't have the situation where a rogue operating system could be launched. Because, as you can imagine, that's almost your worst nightmare, right? If a hacker gets in and launches a rogue operating system, well, they've got the keys to everything. They can do anything they want. And so the idea of secure boot is we won't let that happen. But of course, if you're a hacker and you want to launch a rogue operating system, what do? You try and disable secure boot. So Black Lotus, this, think of it like a virus, but at the BIOS firmware level, that's exactly what it does, is it goes there and it disables secure boot. And so essentially what happens at that point is once you've got that disabled, then the hacker can go in, launch a rogue operating system, and off you go. So that's without getting into the details of the vulnerabilities, that's a method that is very commonly used. And so, we know that here at Phoenix Technologies, since we've been in the firmware business, for a long time. And so one of the things that we've baked into FirmGuard, which my colleague Rob will show you later in the demo, is as soon as we detect that a particular endpoint doesn't have secure boot enabled, it's going to show up right on the dashboard. So you're going to know, hey, I've got this many endpoints that don't have secure boot enabled. You can click on it, and then you can sort of remediate that situation. And we provide a thing called Secure Config, which allows you to enable secure boot. So that's just one very common mechanism. There, I could talk for days on this. I don't want to hog the whole time doing that, but that's a very common mechanism that's used.
Talk for days and scare the crap out of us, right?
Yeah,
So we've
right.
got major security risks when it comes to BIOS firmware level. We've got the pain of having to actually physically send a tech on site whenever you have to access it, and knowing that this is dangerous territory here. We've gotten down to the firmware level, and then this BIOS intimidation. I mean, anybody on this webinar, just type a Y or an N, a yes or a no into the chat. Like, does that BIOS intimidation, does that resonate with you? Like I said, I'm sure when we talked about that, everyone was just kind of like, yes, I understand that. Unless you are like the, BIOS firmware expert, I get that. But, it's something that I think most everybody can really relate to. So we've got those kind of three things. Some Y's and no's, Y's. Okay. Yep. We're in IT. We fear everything. Anxious people, aren't you? Okay, so we've talked about, kind of some of the challenges, security, having to, send a tech on site, this BIOS intimidation. Amit, you've kind of alluded to, the FirmGuard solution that Phoenix has. Obviously, Jesse and Malcolm, you guys are users of that. Can you talk about how did FirmGuard solve that for you? Why did you choose FirmGuard? Jesse, we'll start with you this time since we went with Malcolm first last time.
Sure. Well, when Rod came to me after a conference where he had met somebody at a FirmGuard booth and he explained the product, I was skeptical, to be honest. I had no idea how that would work and whether it was true. It seemed too good to be true. So I was obviously interested. So we set up a demo, we got the trial, and during the trial, I was impressed. I honestly didn't expect it to do exactly what it said it was going to do, which allowed me to remotely configure BIOS without hiccups. And it installed easily. It didn't intrude on much. And from there, we really didn't question whether we should or shouldn't. It was kind of a no-brainer. It was a given that there's no other tool like this. We got to have this. And we've just been using it since.
Yeah. Can you talk about, I'm going to bounce over to you in a second, Malcolm, but Jesse, can you talk about maybe a couple examples for like when it's come in and either saved the day or just kind of been really helpful for you guys? Some examples of how you've used it?
Well, I think we might talk about this later, but the secure wipe feature is something unique to this product. A wiping feature that's at the lowest level it could possibly be while also being a remote solution. That's opened doors for us in the compliance field, but also being able to see exactly what hardware we have in our environment, which we may or may not inherit from another IT provider. it may or may not be the right type of Windows. It may or may not be a manufacturer we would recommend, but we can always use FirmGuard to pop in and see exactly what is available to us at the lowest level of the machine and not just what we see through Windows. That's been invaluable.
Jesse, I remember you and I were having a chat, and you mentioned to me that sometimes you use secure config when you get a new client to actually see the specific capabilities of the hardware that they have. And I think you've discovered some things there that you didn't even realize existed from a hardware perspective, which I thought was an interesting sort of novel use of secure config. That's not sort of how we, initially conceived the feature, but as is always the case, customers find interesting ways to use different features and capabilities.
Yes, and it's not even just clients we've inherited, but even the hardware we've been working on for years. You click into a panel and you discover it's got capabilities you've never heard of and didn't know it had specific to that model. Things like bottom cover tamper protection on some Lenovo notebooks, so that should somebody take the laptop home and try and pop in their own SSD and swap the OS or whatever, it'll trigger it to where it'll require the BIOS password the next time it boots after it's been tampered with. And that kind of thing is never would have found that had I not installed firmware on there, FirmGuard on there, unless I went and looked up the exact model number on Lenovo's website and looked through a spec sheet. And it was available to me at the click of a button from my desk, and I didn't have to kick the user off their computer and say, I want to learn what's on your computer. Go play for a minute. I gotta spin this thing into a totally different system to see what's on here. Didn't go that way.
Yeah. Find out the DNA of the kids you inherited, right?
Yeah, really.
All right, Malcolm, I'm going to ask you the same question. How has Phoenix FirmGuard solution, solved for some of the issues that we talked about, a couple minutes ago?
Well, I was in the middle of looking at our cybersecurity stack to begin with, and it identified a gap that I didn't even realize that I had. And I had a tech that had done some, shall we say, ethical hacking before, not in any way bad way, but identified some security gaps in another arena that he brought to my attention, and I had to help him get out of, that I realized we had in our own shop and needed to figure out a way to get it addressed. And lo and behold, Phoenix Technologies FirmGuard showed up, and during the webinar, I'm sitting there texting him like, is this what you found? And is this what got you in trouble? I got the response, yes. This is also my tech that years ago would load his own operating system on the school's network and crash the school's network. And it couldn't be found out until they watched the cameras to see who was coming into and out of the room. And I'm sure had they had FirmGuard on their network at the time, they would have been able to identify some of those things and prevent them from happening. So for us, it was a foundational element to improving our security gap. I was on here a little bit later because I was coming from a TBR. And what I also realized, it's going to help us identify unsupported hardware to recommend the cover or that the customer or client remove from their network. And so a byproduct of that, the customer said, hey, I don't even want that system in my network anymore. Appreciate you bringing that to my attention. Let me go take care of that. He's like, that's an old Dell. We don't want it anymore. It was on Windows 10, so it theoretically could be good until next October. But he's like, I'll just go ahead and get rid of it. So that was a good one. And then I had another customer come to me, and I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, that wanted to secure wipe a system, and this would do it. We had also been dabbling with some of our own writing our own wiping technology and all that sort of stuff, and had some good success, had demoed it in other areas, but shelved that for the moment because came upon this and was like, okay, we can do this remotely, done.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love you used an analogy when we were talking the last time, which really resonated with me, which was you were talking about paving the road before you need the road. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, and that's where you start to look at who's doing the hacking and where they are. And much of the BIOS hacking until I heard about Black Lotus, which scares the crap out of me, had been done by state actors. And if you can get the BIOS, you can get anything above it. And what we wanted to do was to make sure that when compliance comes barreling down the road and when the government entities get involved and they say, from a cybersecurity insurance standpoint, you need this, 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 and this, we want to have our clients in a position that they're going to get the best policy available to them because they've already checked those boxes. We've helped them check those boxes. So that's paving the road before they need it. And I don't know how many of the people on this call have gone through their latest cybersecurity insurance form or the VIG that you need to pay to get someone to even take a look at it. But they're becoming very prescriptive in their behavior, as is the federal government. And we would just want to make sure that we stay ahead of that fast moving train.
Yeah, I agree. Does that jive with you too, Jesse, that paving the road, before you need it? Resonate with you?
Yeah, because FirmGuard is so foundational in that stack of software. I mean, it's underneath, it's in the maintenance tunnels, really. I would even go even deeper than the road. It's underneath. It's like the crawl space underneath your house. I mean, you want it there and you want it solid before something requires you to perform a secure wipe. You want it there before you have a BIOS issue so you can see the log and see what changed and get an alert from it. It's something you want before. It's, I guess, a preventative measure as well as an active tool. But it makes life easier to have it there before you need it.
Yeah, I hear you saying it's foundational. You've got to have it. And it's, it can't be one of those things where it's like, well, maybe I'll do it later. Maybe I'll do it, I'll look at it next month or next quarter. Like, no, it's do it now. Do it now. Put that road down now before it's too late.
Well, Allison, if I may add to that point, at the time we presented it we haven't even presented it to our clients. I made the decision, do it. I'll figure out how we get paid if we get paid later, because what I don't want them to do is have something happen and come to us and saying, why didn't you address this?
Yep. Yeah. So we've kind of touched a little bit, on compliance. We've hinted at it here and there. Amit, if you just want to take a couple quick minutes, how can FirmGuard help with compliance?
Right. Yeah. So, there are a variety of things that I could talk about. We won't get into, a lot of detail, but, ISO 27001, for example, there are a variety of things that we can help with there, NIST standards. But I want to touch upon, from a standards perspective, something that Jesse mentioned, because I think this will give people a good sense of how it can help. So, Malcolm's also mentioned Secure Wipe, which is a feature that allows you to remotely wipe a drive of an endpoint. And again, we'll demo that shortly. But there's a very well-known standard called NIST 800-88, and the title is Guidelines for Media Sanitization. And that's just a fancy word for wiping a drive. And so, when we developed Secure Wipe, we had that standard in mind. And one of the key things in that standard is they recommend for certain levels of wipe, not trivial ones, but those that you want to make sure that no data is recoverable, that you provide a certificate of erasure, essentially a receipt, after the fact, so that you can document, hey, such and such person did this wipe at this time using this method, and so forth. So I think that's a great example of how FirmGuard can help MSPs really help their clients become compliant with NIST 800-88. Again, there are many more that I could talk about. And I know Jesse and I've spent quite a bit of time talking about that specific one because he's had customers ask him, specifically about that standard and what can be done.
Yeah. So if you're selling compliance, if you're offering compliance, again, it's a must that you have this so that you can check that box, off when it comes time to.
That's right.
So next question I have for Malcolm and Jesse. So we're talking about, introducing a new tool to your stack. And I think MSPs, when they hear that, they're like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'd love to, but like, do I raise my prices? Do I just include it in my stack? Like how do I integrate it, with my stack? How do I go to my clients, or do I go to my clients and tell them that I'm adding that? So Malcolm, how did you kind of handle that piece of things when you decided to add it to your stacks? I know you said it was like, yeah, it's a must. We're doing it for everyone.
Yeah, initially we just did it. And as I go forward and present 2024, my new 2024 stack, I will say, here's your 2024 stack, here's the price. I think we've done a very good job of getting them to understand the value already, so that trust is there. Again, I've run it sort of as a concierge IT, so inherently mine is relationship and trust rather than volume in a lot of instances. Going into 2025, instead of it being just an add-on item, it will be a part of that foundational cybersecurity tech stack.
Okay, so you built the road, you're kind of shouldering it for now, but you're charging for it come next year.
Actually, we're about to roll out our new MSAs, so come August 1st, we're charging for it. And I've already got the blessing of one of the customers. I'm a little late to the call because of that, but that blessing was key, because basically what we're going to upcharge them, pays for it, and now we start to make a little bit of margin on it.
Love it. Love it.
So you're
Jesse,
doing that wholesale. Sorry, Malcolm, you're doing that wholesale across your entire client base, the upcharge?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Because, from our experience, we've seen certainly people do that, but also some, do it as new contracts come up. But that's interesting to hear.
Well, I say that, but I'm also rolling out my new contracts in August. Got a new contracts engine. We're rolling out the new terms. Here you go. Oh, by the way, here's the new tech stack.
Right.
Yep. Pave the road to all your clients and then make money.
Mhm.
What about you, Jesse? How did you guys kind of roll this out? How are you bundling it or not bundling it?
Well, we handled it about the same. At first, because it was a new product to me, I didn't immediately deploy it to every client. I did it in stages. But I found at the end of it, in retrospect, I didn't really need to be so cautious. It didn't conflict with any other agents. It didn't cause any crashes or issues. It was a clean install. And I did it all through my RMM. I made a script within a couple minutes and it was out. After we signed on, we deployed it to all clients in that stage process, absorbing the cost up front because we saw the value in it, the immediate value in it that superseded the need to start billing for it. Like I said, it's good to have it there before you need it, and then we can bill however we need to later. But I want to be prepared to handle any of these BIOS issues that may arise. Once we had it installed, I spent a little bit of time learning what it looked like across all these different environments with different manufacturers, and discovered that it's pretty ubiquitous. It works. And we are going to add it into our package. In a way, it's already in the package. It's just not written as a line item. And I've been, our package still is in kind of a flux state. And I need to start advertising it as a line item because it does affect the value to the package. It's not just a tool for us. It really does come back around to the client. So I'm going to add it to our value explainer. I'm going to add it to our spreadsheets, whether it has a markup or not, because I see the value one-to-one. So yeah,
Okay.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, love it. Love it that both of you guys are kind of proactively recognizing that if you don't have it in place, it's going to cost you way more than just kind of eating the cost for a little bit until you can add it to your stack officially and get those clients paying for it. So, Amit, I want to kind of pivot over to you, and I know you've got a couple slides. I hinted to it at the beginning that, we've got, some free scans where you guys are able to kind of use FirmGuard on yourself and on your clients. If you want to kind of go through, your content there and meet on kind of what
Sure.
FirmGuard is, some of the benefits, and how do they take advantage of those free scans?
Yeah, let me actually start with that, just because I'd like people to have some time. This is we call it our secure check audit. It's it's totally free. In fact, if you don't listen to anything else I say today, I would encourage you to listen to this one thing. In fact, if you have your web browser in front of you, bring it up and type in firmguard.com/TMT. And this is very simple. It's free. And what it's going to do is it's going to audit all the endpoints that you want to put out there. And so it's going to tell you things like I've been mentioning. Do you have some endpoints that don't have secure boot enabled? And just to give you an idea, this isn't the first time, obviously, we've done this. We've done this on a couple of webinars. And just to throw a statistic out to you, and this is real data that we found based upon the audits, 16% of the previous secure check audits we did had secure boot not enabled or disabled, 16%. So that's essentially right there, 16% of those endpoints. Now, this is across multiple MSPs and large numbers of endpoints, but that's 16% that are susceptible to have a rogue operating system be launched on them. I had previously mentioned that 9%, it's actually I think 8.7, so let's call it 9%, actually were in legacy mode. And I think, Malcolm, you talked about that a little bit earlier. And one of the ways you solve that problem when something is in legacy mode is you just get that endpoint out of circulation. Because typically what it means is it's a very old endpoint. It's probably 6, 7, 8, 10 years old. And you just don't want that in your system anymore. So I'd encourage everybody, go to firmguard.com/TMT, sign up. We will have, an account team work with you to not only help you install FirmGuard, but then also walk you through some of these issues that you're likely to find with Secure Boot or BitLocker or what have you. So kind of working a little bit backwards here, but let me spend a few moments just sort of walking you through. We talked about this. In fact, I think both Jesse and Malcolm used the word foundational. So firmware is clearly foundational. I've talked about that already. It's the very first thing that comes up when you power on your endpoint, and it launches the operating system. And so as we've mentioned, if you can get control of the firmware, you got control of the entire endpoint. So in some sense, what FirmGuard is doing is it's locking down that firmware so that you don't have these sort of rogue operators, be able to do things that you don't want them to do. This is probably a little anticlimactic at this point. I think you know the answer here, but where do you get a solution for BIOS firmware security, compliance, and technician efficiency? I think Malcolm and Jesse have already talked enough about it. It's clearly FirmGuard. And so, we've talked about a lot of these features here, but I want to do a moment to just sort of level set so everybody knows what we're talking about. And this is going to become more clear in just a moment when I hand it over to Rob Inman to do the demo. But there are, 5, as we speak, 5 discrete features of the product. And the naming convention, you can probably figure out, but it's all secure something. So secure check, secure config, secure wipe, secure sense, secure beat. Secure check, here on the left side, that's sort of the base capability, if you will. It's what really does the bulk of the BIOS firmware security work. So, I talked about detecting secure boot not being enabled. It's secure check that figures that out, and it's constantly monitoring your BIOS. So if there are new types of vulnerabilities that come up, it's constantly aware of them. You can sort of think of it as antivirus at the firmware level. But the product, as Jesse and Malcolm have alluded to, goes well beyond that. So there's a sort of, let's call it technician efficiency aspect to it. And, kind of dovetails with what Jesse and Malcolm were saying. We have a lot of customers that will come on and will start paying for the product, before they upcharge their customers. And they tell us one of the main reasons why they're willing to do that is because you've got features like secure config and secure wipe and others that make your technicians more efficient. Right? Great example of that is what Jesse talked about. So rather than having to send a technician or having to go to the client site to change, a BIOS setting, for example, enabling TPM maybe because you're moving machines from Windows 10 to Windows 11, rather than send somebody on site to do that, or even worse, have to talk a non-tech person on the phone through doing that, which is painful. I see you nodding there, Malcolm. I think you've probably dealt with that issue. Certainly a lot of our customers have. that right there is worth the price just to start with, just because you save yourself so much time. Then there's secure wipe, right? I can't emphasize that enough. We've talked about it, but it's obviously a security related feature, but it's also great from an efficiency perspective because you don't have to actually physically have the endpoint in your possession in order to wipe it. And that has a lot of benefits, not only from an efficiency perspective, but it's also good for your client because you don't want them mailing this endpoint around where it could be intercepted or what have you. So you can be sitting in your seat, in your office, remotely wipe the drive, get a certificate of erasure, and that's it. You never left your office. And so, that sort of, goes right into, I want to talk about, a couple of concrete sort of buckets, if you will, of benefits for the product. We've talked about security and compliance quite a bit, so I won't really go into that, but, you're closing that BIOS firmware security gap. I mean, that's probably the simplest way to put it. And really, it's just the right thing to do for your clients, right? I know every MSP out there, wants to do right by their client, and this is just a way to do that. We've talked about compliance, and I think Malcolm mentioned, could help you reduce your cyber insurance bill, your client's cyber insurance bill. And then there's, of course, the technician efficiency aspect, which we've been talking about. And, I've listed sort of the three main features that do that: secure config, secure wipe, and secure sense. I won't go over that again. But again, I would encourage you to sign up for the free audit, because you're going to see these things in action for yourself. And you're going to get benefit right away, because you're going to see issues that you didn't know about that your clients are dealing with right now. And then, of course, if you're doing all these things, obviously you're going to increase your MRR, right? That's a given. As we've talked about, you may use it initially for technician efficiency, but then eventually you're going to roll that in, just like you do EDR or the various other security tools you have. This is really no different. So, you can think of it conceptually, it's like EDR for your BIOS firmware. I mean, that's really, really what it is. We don't talk about it that way, but it very much is. And so if you look at that stack that I had earlier, you've got the operating system and the application, you're covering those, but you have missed a full 1/3 of your stack, which is the BIOS firmware. And you obviously don't want to be in a situation where 1/3 of your client's tech stack is exposed. That's not where you want to be. And then you can differentiate yourself. Now, hopefully that doesn't last very long, because everybody starts using FirmGuard, in which case, okay, it's nothing special. But you've got time to jump in right away and begin to differentiate yourself, as Jesse and Malcolm have done. This is just another way of showing you, security, compliance, efficiency, and just sort of giving you a sense of the various features. I should mention on the Secure Check audit that I talked about, you get every feature. So every one of these features that I'm showing you, you get them all. This is not like hey, we're giving you a little limited subset of the product. It's the entire thing, everything. You can go wipe drives, you can go reconfigure things. Obviously, you'll get a sense of issues with your products. It's everything, for a full 15 days. And as I say, it's a limited time offer. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't already, go to firmguard.com/TMT, register for it. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. This is, Allison knows very well, this isn't the first time that we've offered this. And, I'm giving you real data that we've gotten from, the data that I'm giving you. The 16% of audited endpoints had Secure Boot disabled, 9% were in legacy mode. And the stat I haven't given you is 30% of endpoints that we had in our previous audits, only 30%, I should say, had BitLocker enabled. So that means 70% didn't have BitLocker enabled, which is, frankly, was a bit surprising for me to see that. Now, maybe it was just that subset that we audited, but this was across many, many thousands of endpoints. So that's
kind
real.
Of a scary statistic there.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I was chatting with some of the engineering folks internally here at Phoenix on the FirmGuard team, and yeah, the 16%, not having Secure Boot enabled, yeah, okay, I could kind of buy that. The 9% legacy, the 30%, BitLocker, the only 30% having BitLocker enabled was a bit surprising. And I know, Jesse, you had you and Rod, I think, were a little surprised when you first saw it. I don't know if it was quite that out of balance, but But again, this is another thing that you're going to get right on the dashboard. We're going to tell you, is BitLocker enabled or not on every one of your endpoints. And again, Rob in just a moment is going to show you that.
Yeah. We've got a couple questions coming in. I see them. We're going to get to them at the end here, after the demo that we have here in a couple minutes, that will kind of show you the back end. I know everybody likes to see, the back end there. But I would say, even if you're at all interested, if you're at all curious, sign up, for the secure check audit. You're going to get access to everything that Jesse and Malcolm have been talking about, not just for you, but for any of your clients as well. You want to test it out on some of your own machines, roll it out and see, what actually are we looking at in terms of what is at the firmware level for our clients. So it's free. It's a no-brainer, you guys. You have nothing to lose. I don't know why you wouldn't do it. So go ahead, go to that site and fill out the form, for to get your free scan. And you know what? I'm gonna actually too, if you're lazy and if you don't want to go, to that website, I'm gonna go ahead and launch a poll here. And it's gonna ask you, let's see, it's gonna ask you if you are interested in learning more about FirmGuard. So let me go ahead and launch this. And while I'm doing that, if you say, I like the product, or I want more information, they'll reach out and get you the scan. While that poll is going, we're going to do a demo here in just a minute. So hang tight to see the demo. But I have one more question for our panelists before we go into the demo. And that is, in your own words, why do you think an MSP should use FirmGuard? Any volunteers to go first?
I'll go first.
Go for it, Malcolm.
Mitigate your inherent risk. And there's, I guess, big words there, but limit the amount of things that your customer or client can blame you for.
Okay. Love it. Jesse, in your own words, why should an MSP use FirmGuard?
Let me think. I guess fix problems you didn't know could be fixed with a tool that you did not know could be used.
I like it. Fix problems you didn't know could be fixed with a tool you didn't know could be used. Did I get that right?
I don't know if it makes literary sense, but that's how I feel.
No,
Emotional response.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. No, Jesse, you're actually bang on, because what I can guarantee you, if you do this secure check audit, you're going to find some things that you didn't realize. It might be something as simple as, wow, I didn't realize I had so few machines or so few clients out there with BitLocker enabled. Might be something as simple as that. Probably it's going to be what Malcolm found, which is, oh my goodness, we've got clients with machines that are so old that they're in this legacy BIOS mode. We just got to get rid of them. And your customers may push back on you initially, but they'll thank you at the end of the day. I mean, to Malcolm's point, right? Because you're just telling them the right things.
Yeah, and to expand on that, in the portal for FirmGuard, when things are incompatible, you get really a lot of information about why, and it's so user-friendly that I would feel comfortable putting FirmGuard in front of the customer and saying, there's a red flag next to this thing, there's a red flag next to this thing, this is what it means, this is why it's insecure. It's that user-friendly, unlike your typical BIOS panel, which I wouldn't show to any customer, or else they think I was hacking the Pentagon or something, It's that user-friendly.
Okay, so speaking of user-friendly, I want to go ahead and bring on Rob to do a quick little demo. Let me end the poll here. And while you're coming on, Rob, while you and Jess, you're kind of swapping screens, I know there's a couple questions about, RMM tools. It does not replace your RMM tool, but Dwayne asked, Amit, does it integrate with, ConnectWise and other PSAs? And I think short answer is yes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, we've got some integrations. And obviously we'd be happy to chat with you about those in detail. In fact, Rob Inman, who I'll introduce, is about to do the demo, is the person that can talk to you about that. He's spent a lot of time working with RMM tools. So anyway, don't want to steal your thunder, but welcome, Rob, and yeah, take us away. Show us what the actual product can do.
Thank you, Amit. Appreciate that. Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Inman. I'm the Senior Sales Engineer for Phoenix and specifically the FirmGuard product. I've actually spent a lot of time in the MSP world myself. So, I kind of know a little bit about what the expectations are and what are the things that you guys go through. So, I like to think that I know a little bit about not just this side of it, but also your side of what's going on. And this is a quick demo, so I definitely encourage you to sign up, like Allison mentioned, for the Secure Check audit. We'll be able to dive into a lot of things more deeply during that, but I just wanted to point out some of the features that we talked about up to now in this webinar. So I'll move through this, and I know that you'll probably have some questions, and we'll try to answer them here. But like I said, if you sign up for that Secure Check audit, we'll be able to dive a lot deeper with you. Probably with me. I already saw some people signed up tomorrow, so hoping to see you there because you'll be getting me. So let's start off here with our dashboard, right? So this is where you see kind of like what's going on with your endpoint. Now, probably the most important one is what you see up here in your top left, right? Your endpoint health. And I'm going to go over some of those features. So as we can see here, Secure Boot has been disabled on 2 devices. And as Amit was mentioning, Secure Boot is what happens before the system actually gets into the OS. And I'm sure a lot of you spend some good money on MDRs, XDRs, EDRs, and they spend a lot of money making sure that they are as good as possible. So once you're in the OS, you're probably well protected, and hackers know this, so they try to get in before the OS loads. Now, Secure Boot was actually created to prevent that, but if it's disabled, it's hard for you to figure out that it's been disabled. And that's where we can come in and show you, like what we see here in this dashboard, that we have 2 machines with Secure Boot disabled. So what do we do in that case? Of course, we click on that, we'll see those 2 machines. I'll click into this Lenovo. So the first thing you'll see here is that our Secure Check that ran is showing that Secure Boot appears to be disabled. Now, this is like the English-based warning for you. If you are, like Neo from the Matrix and can read machine language, well, we also show you all sorts of information about what has changed. You can get a full report and really dive in and see all this information. Quite frankly, for me, I just settle for this. Tells me that Secure Boot's disabled, enable Secure Boot. And how are we going to do that? Well, that is editing the BIOS. And of course, in the past, you'd actually have to have hands on the machine, reboot the machine, figure out what the F key is for that particular manufacturer, which, it seems like that they randomly choose one. But here we can go into our secure config settings. So right here, I can go into my Lenovo BIOS settings. And here's basically, and I'll scroll down so you can see pretty much everything that I have access to in the BIOS of this machine. So all of these settings are available to me right here from this panel. Now, I know that the Secure Boot setting is here under the security. I can come in here to Secure Boot. Sure enough, this is not checked. So I can go ahead and check this, go ahead and click Save. Now, this will reboot the machine. So depending on whether you really are like, hey, we need Secure Boot enabled, I'm going to reboot the machine, I don't care what the user's doing, we could do that immediately. Or you could schedule this and say, you know what, I'm going to schedule this after hours, 6 p.m., whatever the case is, so that I don't interrupt their workday. So, we can go ahead and do that. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to reboot the machine that's in my demo environment. But as you can see from here, you have a lot of settings. Wake on LAN, if you want to, enable that from here, again, without having to touch the machine. Changes in the power plan, boot sequence settings. If your boot manager got changed for whatever reason. All of this is available right from here. So the other thing that was mentioned is Secure Wipe. Right, and you'll notice that we do have a tab over here for Secure Wipe. And this is showing me I have 2 hard drives in this machine. This top one has a couple partitions. Bottom one doesn't because we actually did a Secure Wipe on it. But I can select this drive. I can select all drives, actually, if I wanted to. In this case, I'm just going to select the top drive, click Wipe Drive, and now it gives me, how do I want to wipe the drive? Now, we have the ATA Secure Erase. That's what we normally recommend for ATA drives. Basically overwriting zeros on all the data. But as you can see, we have a lot of different options, even all the way down here, US DOD, US Navy and Air Force, which weirdly uses a different method than DOD. If you work with international customers, British, Canadian, German versions. But the reason for this is that you're going to be still under the compliance that your customer requires. So when you go through and you decide that you're going to erase a drive, which you click here, of course, you get the big scary message. There's no coming back from this. Your data is going to be gone. So you do actually have to type the word confirm, so you can't accidentally next yourself into oblivion. So you have to type confirm, and then that's going to start the process. I am going to cancel this. Now, once that wipe is done, you'll notice we have a tab up here for certificates. We can come over here to certificates, and in this case, we can see this machine. It was sent to be wiped. It got done. One drive was wiped. I can click here and actually view the certificate for that wiped drive. Now, this is what that auditor is going to be after when they're like, hey, you just wiped a bunch of drives. How can I be sure that you've followed the right procedures? Because there's three ways to wipe a drive. One, you format it. Of course, everyone knows that's not really secure, but it is quick. You can get that done. On the other side of that spectrum is physically destroying the drive, which does fall under a lot of compliances, but you have to actually go to the machine, get the drive pulled out. So your technician has to do that. Then you got to figure out, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to shred it? Are you going to, I don't know, take it to a shooting range, whatever you decide to do. But this is the good middle ground where now you're doing this remotely. So you don't have to dispatch any technicians to a location, and you're getting that certificate that shows that you followed the proper procedure to get this drive erased while still staying within the compliance that your customer requires. So this is really nice. The other thing that I wanted to show you, if I go back here in dashboard, which was also touched on by me, legacy boot right here. Legacy boot is enabled. So let's click on this. I have this one machine, and I'll also talk about secure sense. So you'll notice here that we have a lot of information that we're grabbing from the system. Again, we're doing this from the BIOS level. And I know that your RMM is probably also doing something similar. Usually they get it from Windows directly as opposed to the BIOS. But you know what? You can keep your RMM honest by using the information that you have here. Or it's just, extra information. Like, for example, I know here we got, the disk, the serial number, the memory manufacturers with those part numbers. So you can kind of get a little extra information that you might not get from the RMM. But what I want to focus on up here is the operating system that we see has this legacy tag. Now, you see that this is running Windows 10. So it's not like it's running Windows XP or some really ancient operating system, but it's running in legacy mode because most probably the hardware doesn't support the latest security features like TPM chips and so on. So this is a good way to come in here and take a look at this and say, this machine should be retired as soon as possible. Let's make sure we put something in the budget for next quarter to replace these machines that we found in legacy mode, so that now moving forward, you can make sure that your OS is secure with everything that you're running on it. So that is just kind of a quick overview of some of the features that we talked about during this call. Like I mentioned at the beginning, like Allison has mentioned, please sign up for that Secure Check audit, because we'll be able to dive in, take a little more time, and answer your questions as we go. So please go ahead and do that, and I'll be happy to help you with it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob, for giving us a peek behind the curtain and seeing that. I've got a couple questions here. I know we're a couple minutes over, and so appreciate you guys staying on. But first question that I have here is from Dell. He's been waiting for a while. I told him we'd get to it, but his question was, how does this solution compare to vPro?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. Basically, the way you have to think about FirmGuard is vPro is more tied to the chip itself, the Intel chip itself. So this is a product that works across a heterogeneous set of endpoints. So I think Jesse kind of alluded to what it does is, it doesn't matter whether you've got Dell, HP, Asus, Acer, different types of manufacturers or OEMs, it'll operate the same across all of them. With vPro, you'd have to have machines that specifically have that capability and have that turned on. It's also very problematic to use because it's more at the hardware level. So I think the simplest answer is FirmGuard works across all of your endpoints, servers, and laptops, desktops, and it sort of makes it all look the same. You don't have to deal with different vendor tools. I mean, I often get the question, for example, for my Dell systems, I can use iDRAX or something like that. That will work, but that'll only work for your Dell servers. What about if you've got a client? Because the MSPs can tell you don't control what endpoints your clients have. So if they don't all have Dell, they have some combination of various, maybe even some white boxes they made themselves. Good luck using those OEM tools. You're going to need something like FirmGuard to work across your entire set.
Yeah, and I think you kind of alluded to this, but Jeremy's, he had a question here. Does it work with non-Phoenix BIOS?
Yeah, let me be very clear. If you know Phoenix, we've been around since 1979, and we know firmware for sure. But no, this is in no way tied to Phoenix BIOS. I want to say that 3 times. It works across any BIOS. Doesn't matter who the manufacturer of it is. Can be anybody.
Agnostic. I love it.
Absolutely, 100% agnostic. Yes.
All right, I've got a question here from, I apologize if I'm butchering your name, Faraz. This option, so the FirmGuard is only available when the machine is online, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I'll read a little bit into the question. I wonder if maybe, because we get this question a lot, things like secure wipe, for example. One of the use cases, we haven't really talked about it, but one of the use cases for secure wipe is if you have an endpoint that was stolen. You can actually initiate a wipe and wipe that drive. Now, obviously, if the person has stolen and it's offline, it won't wipe when it's offline. But the moment that they come back online, even for a short period of time, we'll immediately send the wipe command and it'll start to wipe, even if then they take it offline. That may be what the person is getting at.
Yeah, she put in the chat, that's exactly the use case she was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you trigger it, and as soon as it's online, it's wiped.
That's right. It doesn't have to be online for the entire wipe. It just needs to be online long enough for the command to be accepted by the FirmGuard agent. And then once it's accepted by the agent, then even if it goes offline, it's still going to start to do the wipe algorithm.
Okay, last question here, because I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but Sina, I see your question. Let's end on something a little timely. Will there be updates to the program? Should we be scared of something happening similar to the CrowdStrike incident?
I don't know if Jesse and Malcolm, you guys want to take that. I will tell you one thing. Believe it or not, we had several customers contact us over the weekend. I guess it was last weekend, and they specifically. And these are folks that we hadn't reached out to. They specifically reached out to us because they heard about CrowdStrike, and they were pretty astute in terms of bias. I think they went to Google and searched and signed up. Actually, I think it was on Tuesday of this week.
Yeah. So
Any insight to that, Malcolm or Jesse?
Quickly.
Oh wait, go ahead. Yeah, go for it, John. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So basically, nothing like CrowdStrike can happen with our updates, and yes, we do update the software regularly. We're going to be adding more features to it. As they come online. However, the reason why the CrowdStrike issue happened in the first place is because those .sys files that CrowdStrike was using, they were set as a boot. I think it's a boot application is what it's called officially, where they have to boot with Windows. And because there was something wrong with the application, it was forced to boot at the Windows level. That's what caused all the blue screens after the fact, because the computer thought something's wrong, I'm going to blue screen before something worse happens. We're not at that level. So something like what happened with CrowdStrike can't happen with our updates.
Perfect. No fear there. And Rob, I'm sorry, I called you John. I know a John Inman, that's why. So Rob. All right, you guys, thank you so much for being on this webinar. Amit, Jesse, Malcolm, Rob, I appreciate you guys. Thank you to everybody for attending this. I know you took time out of your busy day because it's important to you that you are protecting your clients. It's important to you that you're providing the best possible solutions, to your clients. So let's pave the road before you need it. In the words of our astute MSP panelists, go ahead. If you signed up for that FirmGuard audit, they'll be reaching out to get that scheduled. If you said yes in the poll, I'm happy to see a lot of people are already saying that they're scheduled. Again, it's a no-brainer. You guys, there's no reason. You're not losing out on anything. It is free. Let's pave that road before you need it. Appreciate you guys for being on, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
Right. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Allison.